Hi, I'm Paul, the Happy Gilder. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to cover a basic Photoshop process of creating the kind of scrolls that you see on a lot of old Victorian artwork. Now, the thumbnail for this video is a lot more elaborate than the contents of the tutorial, but the thumbnail has used sort of techniques that I've covered in previous videos. So I'm going to put a link to all of those up here. So if you want to follow along with some of the digital processes that I've covered in the past, you'll be able to create something similar and likely better. But before we crack on with that, if you're a fan of reverse glass, Victorian techniques, gold leaf, sign painting, all of the above and more, then you're in the right place because that's all this channel's about, and I usually release a video every week. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description, and I reward my patrons every month with a different vector design. There's also a link to my Etsy shop, my Instagram, and the Happy Gilder Facebook group. Right, now out of the way, let's crack on. Right, so this is a pretty basic tutorial, and all you're going to need is a kind of basic knowledge of Photoshop layers. And don't worry if you haven't got that basic knowledge, because I'm just going to show you that now. So I've got Photoshop open, and at the moment the only thing available is my toolbar on the left-hand side. So I'm going to go up to Window, or you can press F7, but if I go to Window, everything in terms of tool palettes that you might need are in here, and I'm just going to get my layers up. Now at the moment there's nothing because I haven't made any layers, but I do have a document here. Now it doesn't matter what size you make this, I'll show you what the properties of mine are, and 16 by 12 centimeters, and I always do stuff at 300 dpi just because when I convert this to a vector you're going to get much sharper lines than if you're doing this at a low resolution. But anyway, let's just jump into it. So this is our background, and anything we do on this, for example, if I go to my brush, I can paint, and that is painting on my background, and that means I can't really do anything with it. But if I create a layer, what I'm doing then is painting on that layer that is sitting above the background. Then I can do other things with that, like move that around, change the scale of it, and so on. But I don't want this layer. I'm just going to dump that in the bin by clicking the little trash icon. I'll show that again. You have to excuse me if a load of stuff keeps popping up. I've just reinstalled Photoshop and I haven't set all of my kind of preferences yet. But maybe that can be a good thing for people who haven't used this before. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at my shape tool. When you hover over these, it gives you a sort of basic description of what they are, and this is what I want. I'm going to click on that, and I want the rectangle. And then up here we've got some properties of this rectangle. That's saying that's the shape. When I drag it, it's going to fill it in black, and then it's going to stroke the outside with a 1 pixel black line. So let's just see what that looks like. So it's also automatically got up my properties, which I can keep up because they're handy. So now you can see that automatically has made a new layer. I didn't have to click new layer to then draw a shape in it. So that saved us a little bit of time. But what I want to do with this is I'm going to change the fill to white. Now I can do that by going into the colors here. Then just dragging that over into the corner to white and clicking OK. That's fine, but my stroke is barely visible because it's only 1 pixel. So I'm just going to scale this up a little bit. And although that's a little bit overkill, I'm going to stick with something like that for this demonstration just because it's going to be easier to see. So that's fine. Let's start off with that. Now I can just drag this anywhere. By default, your selection tool, which is this tool at the top here, when you press the V key, will probably be set to auto select. I never use this because I just find it gets in the way of things. In this particular tutorial, we're going to have a lot of layers that are sat directly behind others. So it's going to really kind of get in the way having auto select on. We can go through our layers by selecting them manually. So I'm just going to turn that off. And I'm just going to scale that down. Press Ctrl and T. Now the tutorial I'm doing here is in Photoshop Creative Cloud. There are differences. For some unknown reason, Adobe changed some of the transform functions in Photoshop when it moved from CS6 to Creative Cloud. The main one being constraining proportions when you're transforming stuff. So anything prior to Photoshop's Creative Cloud, to scale this up and constrain the proportions, you would hold the Shift key. Now it's the opposite way round. You don't. So I'm not holding Shift. When I do that, that's scaling it without warping any of the kind of aspect ratio. If I hold Shift, it means I can scale it like this. Right. So anyway, here's our shape, and just press OK for now. And what we've got here are our options for the stroke. And the stroke is the line around the outside. So you've got inside, center, and outside, and I want this on the inside. This is going to be the start of our first very basic scroll. So if I just Control T, hold Shift, drag this up, and then you can either double click or you can press the return key. So let's get started making it a little bit more decorative. So firstly, I'm going to go over to my rectangle here. You can rename this. So if I just put front, that'll make sense when you're manually selecting these layers. Then I'm going to right click on this layer and I'm going to go duplicate layer. Now, when you duplicate layer, it's always going to put it on top. And even though they're exactly the same, just because I've named that already and I want to just make sure that they're in the order of how I name them, I just drag that underneath it. Then I'm going to rename this by double clicking on it, and I'll put left 1 because this is going to be the first part of this scroll. Now if I press Ctrl and T on this, that has selected my left 1 and not the front part because I've got that layer selected. So what I can do, I'm going to hold the Shift key and I'm just going to drag this in to about here. And then once you've got that to a kind of distance that you like, I'm going to hold down the Control and the Shift key, and then I'm going to drag it down. Then I'll press return. Now, hopefully you can see how that's going to start taking shape, and it is a pretty basic process from there. Now, depending on whether you want to come straight out at a kind of horizontal angle, or if you want this to come sort of zigzagging down, will just depend on which one of these you decide to duplicate. So if I'm going to have this coming straight out, so I know that the top one comes straight out, so I'm just going to duplicate front, drag that right down to the bottom. I'm going to rename that left 2, and then do the exact same process. I'm going to click transform. Oh, I didn't hold the Shift key. Holding Shift, drag that to there, double click, and then I can just move this into position. And there you've got a kind of really nice basic sort of scroll. Now I can duplicate the other side, but for now I'm just going to show one other little thing. So if I just Control T this and then just scale this out a little bit more. What you can also do, because this is a vector shape, you can add points to this vector shape. And you do that by using your pen tool. So I'm just going to hold Control and the space bar and then click to zoom in. And then when I hover over the pen and I click it, there's an option of adding an anchor point. And then what I'm going to do is hover over this bit here, and that is just added an anchor point that I can manipulate. And while the white arrow is selected over it, that allows you to move that. So just going to fit that on screen. That looks quite nice. Then I'm just going to shift select these two, go to duplicate layers. And then with them still selected, I'm going to go to edit, transform, flip horizontal. And then I'm just going to drag them to the other side. So there, you've got a really nice little basic square scroll that you can sort of put in front of any, don't know, ornate picture or just around a plaque or something like that. So that's the first one. Now I'm going to do something similar, but make it so that we can have the kind of curved scrolls as well. So I'll get that started now. Right, so here's the same canvas, and I'm just starting again with a rectangle. It's got a 10 pixel stroke, and I've made sure that that stroke is on the inside of the shape. Now what I want to do is something similar, but just show you how you can get a little bit more elaborate with some of the shape presets. So you can find those by pressing Ctrl and T, and that will bring up your sort of transform handles. Now up the top here, you'll see this little icon, which is the warp transform. And this is how this brings it up, and in its custom format like this, it just means that you can drag any of these handles or any of the center points as well to warp the shape. I'm just going to press escape because that's not what I want to do. I want to show you how to use some of the presets. So I'm going to press Ctrl and T, go into the warp transform, but instead of using these handles, over here we've got this custom drop down, and in here there's just a number of different presets. So for example, you can set it to an arc, and you can drag it by the little handle here. Arch, which is the same but without the kind of edges going out, all of which will work with the kind of technique which I just showed you on the basic one. But I'll go with flag, just because it's got that kind of really nice traditional Victorian look to it. You see this shape a lot in that kind of old school sign writing. So I'm going to go with this, but before I do that, I'm going to make a copy of my my shape. So I'm just going to escape this. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to warp each bit individually, not have to kind of get my shape from the bit that I've just transformed. So I'll always keep a copy of my sort of basic shape in its normal squarish format anyway. So press Ctrl and T, go to the warp, go to the custom, and then flag. And then depending on how severe, maybe something like that. Click on the little warp icon and then press return. And then that means I've got my nice straight one that I can play with. So let's just rename the one we've just done to front. And that's already named left one, so that works. So I'm just going to press Ctrl and T and then bring this in somewhere like there. And that already looks really nice, I think. But just going to go a little step further and duplicate it again. Just going to rename these because it's good practice, but there's not really a lot of layers. You don't have to do this if there's only a handful. It's easy enough to know what's what. So now Control T on the one I've just created, which is a duplicate of this one, and then I can scale that out. Let's start scaling it to there. So I think that looks like a good length. Press Control and T again. Go to my custom warp and then just go to flag. Yeah, and that looks good. So it needs a little tweak, but I think the only thing it needs is just it needs pulling down a little bit. And you can do that by getting your transform handles up again, and this time press Control and Shift and hold on the middle point. And that allows you to skew it up and down. So I'm just going to drag it down to something like that. And yeah, really like it. It'd look nice being asymmetric, but I'm just going to duplicate these two and drag them across, just so you can see it in its more symmetrical form, even though the center bit isn't symmetrical. And to do that, just go to Edit, Transform, Rotate 180. And that's just flip those 180 and they can just be dragged into position. Might just need a little nudge. Yeah, and that's it. Really nice kind of basic scroll that would look nice with some kind of emblem in here and some nice text running down it. Be nice shaded, you know, you can do some easy sort of line shading down this or just airbrush shading, but either way it's really just a sort of technique to get you playing around with that shape tool and how to use the sort of custom warp. So there you go. Really, really simple and basic way of creating some nice scrolls. Now, obviously, there are nicer ways of doing that by maintaining a curve that goes around a scroll. But for now, I'm trying to keep my kind of digital tutorials on the kind of beginner end. And then as sort of time goes on, I'll make them more and more advanced so that we can sort of, delve into much more sort of complex designs. But for now, I hope you have fun with the technique and I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please subscribe to the channel and click the little thumbs up icon, and please share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. So till next time, cheers.